Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing another movie review, so hopefully you find this one interesting. This movie is a horror film from the United States, English language, released in the year 2014, directed by Jack Heller, and this film is called Dark Was the Night. So Dark Was the Night is set in a very secluded American town. You've got these people who are very worried about the things and the safety of these townsfolk, because during the evening there's a lot of disturbances, and in the morning a lot of animals turn up mutilated or go missing, and there just seems to be no wildlife in the woods nearby, so they believe that something is scaring everything. So these massive footprints that are found inside the town, they are very unnatural for an animal, and so the sheriff and the sheriff's deputy believe that it's someone playing a prank, but the townspeople believe in a local legend that's concerning mythology in Native American Indian folklore, and this myth suggests that there is a creature within these woods that is very bloodthirsty. So they believe that the creature is preparing an attack, and so the sheriff goes investigates this in order to try and calm the people down, but what he discovers the further he goes into his investigation is that maybe this legend has a lot more truth to it than he first gave it credit for. So whether or not that is the case is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Dark Was the Night. This is definitely a serviceable psychological horror film, because this movie excels where a lot of other movies fail, and that is basically the attention to the minor details, and in this particular case in its characters. Now I've said it time and time again in the past, if you don't have very likeable characters, the fear factor goes down quite considerably, and so a lot of other movies aren't really as scary as they could be because they're not willing to actually work for those scares. They believe that jump scares or excessive violence or, you know, scary creatures that you see, that substitutes for what's scary, and if you don't have any depth to it, it's not very scary. But this movie goes out of its way to actually mould some very three-dimensional characters, and I thought the characters actually bring a lot of fear into this film. This is actually quite a scary movie, and it hits you on a very psychological base, and that psychological base isn't only confined to horror, it's also confined into a very character-driven film, in that you've got this sheriff I thought was very likeable, played very well by Kevin Durant. Now this guy was torn up from his past. He had a tragedy that happened in his family that has shaped him as the individual that he is. He's lost all of his self-confidence. There is no ego to this guy whatsoever, so you can really relate to him and you want him to get his life back on track because he's a good person. And this is something that isn't rocket science. If you've got good people in your film, then it's a lot scarier when bad things are happening to them. So I really like the sheriff's character. As I said, Kevin Durant does a great job. Lucas Haas, he does a great job as the sheriff's deputy. I thought once again he had a lot of charisma, and he once again had a troubled sort of past. So this movie is about redemption, and it's a movie about moving on with your life and actually new beginnings. And so not only do you have the two sheriffs, but I thought each and every one of the characters in the community were very good, and it felt like a close-knit community. It felt like a family. They cared for each other, therefore the viewer is going to care for these people. And so I thought that was really good. Then you've also got the mythology of this monster that I thought was fascinating, and you've also got the cautionary tale about humankind contributing to their own demise, and in this case deforestation, and how devastating deforestation can be, and how that can actually lure a threat into their living. And so if you see the film, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, and I thought that was actually quite thought-provoking. But all of these elements come into the film, and none of them really outshine the other. So it feels like a very fine blend, therefore the continuity is very good. None of these elements in the film really feel as though they're taking centre stage. So I never felt that there was unnecessary quality. I thought there was a little bit of backstory to these characters that come very naturally. It's not stopping to go into flashbacks. As the movie goes along, it's giving you a little bit more into the lives of these people without really losing the element of suspense. The whole film reeks of suspense, and it's got a very melancholic feel to it. You know, the story is very sad with this character. You know, the myth of this monster in the woods, there's a lot of paranoia there, and I thought the visuals contribute to that paranoia. It's a very grey palette that the film has, and I thought it just feels like a very uneasy sort of experience straight from the beginning. I will say that there are some absolutely phenomenal subtle pieces in this film that I thought really sent a chill up my spine. In particular, one where you can see these really weird footprints around this sheriff's house, but then all of a sudden it pans out and you can see the footprints all over the town. So you know that while they've been asleep, this dangerous presence has actually been walking through. And so I thought that was very scary, but it's a very psychological sort of scare that you get. And so then then this all adds up to a very, very thrilling climax. Now, I thought that the way the movie progressed was like a wick, and you light the wick and it's getting shorter and shorter up into the stick of dynamite. And this is how the film goes. It's a certain sense of anticipation that gets greater and greater until absolutely it goes completely mental at the end. So it explodes at the end, and it gives you a very rewarding payoff for all the anticipation that the movie puts you through. You don't get to see this monster until the end, and so genuine sort of monster fans might be a little bit disappointed by that, but I thought it was great. It's because you knew that something was building. You knew that it was a pressure cooker and that it was going to boil over in the end. And that's exactly how it feels. And so the director is keeping you on knife's edge. It never gets boring because, as I said, when the horror set pieces aren't in effect, you've got very, very interesting characters. And then when the characters are put into a predicament and put into turmoil, I felt that I really connected to them, so I really wanted them to get through. And that is what creates a very scary atmosphere that the film has. So you've also got a cameo from Nick DeMisi, which is I'm always glad to see him in a film. I thought, yeah, he is in other films such as Mulberry Street and the Stakeland films, so he's a low budget kind of actor, and this is much more of a cameo, but I always like to see his face, so that was a welcome addition. So as far as production is concerned, I thought this was fantastic. It really does nail the psychological suspense, but it hits you on so many more levels than just a cheap horror film, which is definitely what I need to give Dark Was the Night the most credit for. Unfortunately, there are two very minor problems that prevent this movie from being an absolutely brilliant experience, and those two problems come from the very start and the very end. Now, the very start gives you an insight into the actual threat, and I thought it would have been a lot better if they just completely left that out, because it would have left a lot up to your imagination. And so when you set the standard from the very start, it does take some suspense off to some extent, because you don't know what's out there, but you know that whatever it is actually quite dangerous. And so it didn't need that. And if it just kept a little bit of ambiguity to it, I thought it would have been a lot scarier. And then right at the end, I thought the initial ending, where I thought it was going to finish, was actually quite good, because it paid respect to the characters, and I thought it stayed very consistent. And so I really liked that. It's a different kind of ending, and it worked because of the characters and the effort that the director went into. But then it goes a little bit too far, and then it has another ending where I just thought it felt completely out of place, a little bit cheap, and it really didn't need it. I just thought, okay, it seems to be the craze these days is to put something a little bit extra on to give you a different sort of outcome, and I thought that this movie in particular would have been a lot better if they just cut that little bit out as well. So the very start and the very finish it is a negative, but it's a very miniature negative in what was a very, very entertaining and at the same time thought-provoking horror film that I'm highly recommending, and as a result of that, I'm going to give Dark Was the Night 4 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.